Hello, Hassan, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hassan?
Hello, I can hear you, John. Hello.
Hassan, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi,
Hassan?
Jalaj. Yes, I can hear you. Good evening.
Lovely. Because I just got a message that my internet connection is not stable. So I'm a bit worried. Can you see me also?
Yeah.
Lovely.
the audio to this video. It's just- Is it my network here? I seriously can't hear anything. Can you hear me, Jalaj? You're muted, by the way. Oh, I found out why. Sorry. Now I can hear.
It's very soft. I can't really hear you, John.
You can't hear me? It's okay. You hear me enough, that's good. All right, Avi,
No.
cool.
Something wrong here with
No,
my...
John, for me, it's loud and clear.
Yeah, I mean, that's only because
Yeah.
if there's anyone here who's not...
Hassan, you're loud here for me, but not John.
No, that's headphones. My audio here is set for headphones. I'll just turn on my video since everyone can see. Good afternoon, everyone. There's Jalaj and I'm here, and we are very pleased to collaborate on this webinar today. Really, this is an awesome privilege to be part of this webinar hosted by Numerical Analytics in conjunction with Texas Instruments Private Limited. There's one of the things I really enjoy is that it's not just coming and talking with stuff, but also there's people who return, and it's almost like a community that forms. So we probably don't look for numbers as much, but it's great to see people coming again and again, returning, and some like Vitu, I just said, after a long time. Sound is very low. Yes, Anjan, my audio, if you can just wear headphones and then tell me, otherwise it will just peak. When during the recordings, the audio just goes up real high. So I've kept the gain low. I understand that, but just try with the headphones, and if it's still low, let me know, because otherwise it will really peak, and that's not great when the video gets recorded. Okay. So yeah, if it's low, it's probably because no headphones, but it's set for the headphone kind of audio. So yeah, good afternoon, everyone, and this is a webinar hosted by Numerical Analytics, as I said that before, and it's great to see some new people also here. Huge shout out to Neelam, she's from Pune. If there's anyone else who's here for the first time, just raise your hand, and we'll make sure that we point you out. It is slightly low, yes, Purvi, but it's adjusted for the headphones. So if I turn it up, then you'll hear a lot of background noise. So just see if you can get it on the headphones, if you're hearing it on the headphones, and try raising the volume at your end. Cool, great. I want to start it off this webinar by first introducing Jalaj. Okay, I thought today we'll do it slightly different. I'm going to introduce Jalaj, and hopefully he'll introduce me too. But you've seen Jalaj quite often here, and I thought that it would be great for us math teachers to try and show to each other and also to our students. Sometimes, my students are surprised when they get to know that math's not the only thing that I do in life. So today's introduction about Jalaj, I thought, let me talk about Jalaj that has got nothing to do with math. All right. The first thing, and I've known Jalaj, by the way, only through webinars. I've not yet seen him face to face in reality. So it's only through webinars. So like I said, earlier, that this is almost like a community. So probably a month, I don't know how long ago I've known Jalaj in the context of webinars. And in the context of webinars, is only in math. So what are a few things that I found out about Jalaj? First of all, he is Indian from Rajasthan, originally from India, but right now he is in Indonesia. And yes, he loves to travel. There are some videos of him in Turkey. So that kind of gives me the idea that, he loves to travel. But even though he's traveled around and he's not in India, he has a real heart for India. So again, how do I know all these things? Not that he's told me all this, but I see his videos. There's a video, by the way, I'll come to that video a little later on. When I see this video on Vande Mataram, when I see a video on fusion of Kathak and Bharatanatyam, it gives me an idea that, this guy has gone around, gone places, but has still got a very, very, very strong feeling, association, admiration for his motherland. So that's a couple of things about him that I told you. He's got two wonderful daughters who love to sing, which also tells me that, when there's a talent in the home, it's probably somewhere either the mother or the father. Now that part I don't know, but some other time I'll find out and let you know. But in conclusion, what I want to say is that, this is not just the two, three things, but this is a great thing to have, even when you try and model in your own classes. Try and allow for that transparency. Let your students get to know that you are a lot more than math. There's more to you than just math. The final thing that I'll point out about Jalaj is that he has a YouTube video, a YouTube channel. So there, I think his URL to his YouTube channel is there. Please go and check it out. I mean, he's done some videos even on math-related content. But all these fun things that I told you about, to get to know him, go and check it out. And that's Jalaj. And so Jalaj, welcome again for yet another webinar. Looking forward to collaborating and learning from you even as we present it together.
Thanks, John. Thanks. And you really did so many things. And I hope I'll live up to some of the things which you said. But of course, like for motherland, I would just say "Fir bhi dil hai Hindustani," and I'm really like attached to from like from bottom of my heart. I'm always there for my motherland. Okay, so with me is my versatile colleague John, and he has been associated with technology, especially with TA technology for ages now. I think 96, 97. So I'll not talk about much about maths when it comes to John. Other things, other qualities of him, he's a brilliant photographer. You must see his photos sometimes. And he is a traveler, and he loves to travel and take good photos, pictures, and waits for the good moments for good picture. And he has done lots of work in education and technology. He's a program developer. He is he's into the development. He's a great musician, and he has composed so many musical pieces. And I tried to stalk him through various like mediums, but I couldn't find much about him. But whatever I found, it was pretty impressive. So, and he also has a beautiful YouTube channel, and these days he has been posting actively on that channel. And here is his channel. So please like, subscribe, and don't forget to press the bell icon so that you're the first one. 96. I thought John was quite young. Of course,
No,
John
no, no,
is
no,
young.
no. This. I was not born. I mean, you think I was not born to say it? I'm not. I'm not.
And other than this, he has master's degree from Mumbai, like Mumbai Meri Jaan. So he loves Mumbai. He has traveled all over India, so many like places around the globe, but finally he loves the place where he belongs. So he's there, and hope to see him soon in Jakarta. So today's webinar, John, what are plans for today? Are
so
we
to,
doing anything
so
special
to,
today?
so today, as everyone knows about the topic that has been advertised in the flyers, um, this is a topic that is first of all, you know. It's something that's common to both the IB math courses, number one. There's a lot of foundational element there. It's also there in your IGCC programs. It's also something that even our national curriculum students need to know, although I don't know whether I think somebody did mention, Anjan did mention that he's teaching in the ISC. So there might be some of you who are teaching both, or maybe perhaps have taught earlier. This is something that's fundamental, okay? Many schools, maybe you might want to just put it on the chat, many schools choose to start with functions in the first year of DP, diploma program. Some schools do choose to start with statistics, and we try and make this decision, I think the schools that I've taught, with functions, because keeping in mind that, students who want to do IA, it might just assist in that way. So that's kind of the line of thought, but yet I'm not saying that we need to hold on to it, as if it's set on stone. But this is a beautiful topic. Like I said, it goes across curriculum. It is also helpful when you plan, like for an IA kind of thing. So even though we start broad, sometimes there is this phrase used in educational forums: low ceiling and
Sorry, John. Sorry to interrupt you. There are comments coming like they cannot hear you properly. I think you need to
can you
increase your
can you
volume
put
of the
that?
mic.
Can you put it? You know what's going on, right? So tell them it'll be just tell them to raise the volume there or use the headphones. Just tell them that, okay? Okay, just do that for me. Thank you. I'll just try it a little bit, but then the noise will come in. Okay, so I've said this before. If someone is here, Hassan, just put that thing on the message. It'll catch a lot of sound, and perhaps just try, because when I do, sometimes the echo comes into my ear. Okay, you might not hear it, but it'll come into my ear. So just try that. Sorry about that. We can hear John clearly. Okay, that's great. I mean, thank you for that affirmation. But whoever is not able to, I have adjusted the gain for those of you who understand audio, so that it doesn't peak. And whenever we record and try and mix it, that it might peak. So just bear with me and try and use headphones. Try and raise the volume at your end. It'll help. This is just because people ask for recordings. But anyway, thank you. I request you to kindly use headphone and try to. Thank you so much, Hassan, for that. So yeah, I was just saying that this is a very broad topic and a lot of scope. And like I said, in many educational institutions, we use this phrase low floor and high ceiling, a great topic to explore in that sense. Functions in many textbooks also, we come across this phrase saying that it is also used to model the world. So again, going on about the IA, a lot of scope for discussions around that. However, the way we've planned today is, we're using questions driven by discussion and suggestions for activities, how it can be done. So at the same time, if there's something that you've used interesting, like I said, this is a forum, this is a collaboration, this is not going to be, this should never be, and we've tried our best to keep it that way. It's not never going to be one way. So if there's some things that you have in mind to share, please let us know. Okay, raise your hand, put it in the chat. Hassan is going to be keeping a tab on it. And so without further ado, I'm just going to pass it on to Jalaj. He's prepared the entire list of questions. But like I said, it's not just going to be solving questions, because all of us here who've taught even for a year, like I said, this topic goes across curricula. So we all know how to solve questions and what the top ideas are. But like I said, the emphasis is not just on solving questions. This emphasis is not just on looking at technology, but also how we can share ideas and what kind of discussions can we take it in our classrooms. All right, here we go. Jalaj, over to you.
Yep, sure. Okay, so in function, there are different things in different games, but some of things are common. So we have some questions selected. First question we have taken is from May 2017. It's IB Diploma Higher Mathematics question. Let me share my screen. Screen. Oops. Okay, so there you go. Can you all see this? I think I need to turn my camera off because it is demanding too much of bandwidth. Sorry about this. John, can you hear me?
Yep.
Lovely. Okay, so this one is all frozen. One moment. John, do you mind sharing the screen? I mean, sharing those questions with them.
One second.
I'm doing first question.
Yeah, Hassan is at the spotlight. So that's the first question that we have here. But I had solved it also, so I think it's on that page. All right, I'm just looking.
Oh, that's okay.
All right. Okay.
Okay. Otherwise, what I'll do is I'll just write down the question quickly. It won't take long. So the question is, you have been given a function out here. Function is defined as fx, and fx is equal to -1 plus ln of square root of x squared minus 1. This is a simple question which reads, find the largest possible domain. And when it says largest possible domain, uh, domain D for function f to be for f to be a function. It is a 2 marks question, only 2 marks. So the first thing in domain. So domain, as we all know, that domain is something that is input. We input as domain and we get output as range, right? So when we find domain, largest possible domain, usually it's all real numbers. If it is a special function, then we look for the restrictions. And remember, this is only 2 marks question. So there are two things. One thing is a square root function, and the second thing is logarithmic function. So when we find the largest possible domain here, we have to take care that we need to consider the condition for a square root and for the logarithmic function as well. So out here, when you see square root, cannot we cannot have this negative number in the square root. So first thing is x squared minus 1 should be more than or equal to 0. We can have 0, we can have more than 0. But the second thing is out here is log, natural log. And by the way, logarithm was this, either you can say invented or discovered by a mathematician called John Napier. And to honor him, natural log is also called Naperian log. This is one of the discoveries or inventions in mathematics which totally changed mathematics. When it comes to astronomy, doing big calculations and all those things, remember there were no calculators those days. I'm talking about like 7th, 8th century. So logarithm was a tool which enabled everyone to do these big calculations. But still there was no Nobel Prize given to John Napier. You know, John, why he was not given any Nobel Prize?
They didn't have the concept of the Nobel or the Fields Medal at that time.
There was a concept of Nobel Prize. So Nobel Prize is not given in mathematics.
Fields
It
Medal.
is given in literature, peace, then all three sciences and economics, right? Why is it not given in mathematics? Do you have any idea?
I have no idea. I just thought that Fields Medal was exclusively kept for mathematics, but I didn't know why they haven't put Nobel for math. Good question. Why not?
Okay, so there are different stories, and one of the stories is Alfred Nobel, who started with the Nobel Prize, and he had a friend who was a mathematician.
Okay.
And he had a beautiful wife also, and for some reason that lady decided to stay with that mathematician, and she separated, like Amir Khan just got divorced, I was reading today. So Alfred Nobel, he got divorced, and his wife ran away with a mathematician. So he decided that he won't give any Nobel Prize to any mathematician. This is one of the stories.
No, this is brilliant. I mean, I don't know whether that's true, but just going back to, I mean, sorry to take a pause on that. Where since you talked about John Napier, did you also know, Jalaj, that logarithms, when he came up with the idea of the logarithms, that in order to multiply large numbers, he came up with this idea of the log tables. When he tried to explain it to people, people did not understand. And then when he produced log tables, people could use. A lot of research came to a standstill because calculations could not be performed. But years later, and I'm talking about almost 300 years later, okay, and I'm just giving 300 as a ballpark, it could be even more than that. Almost 300 years later, the idea of exponential functions came into being. So it's kind of an irony that one function, which is like a man-made invention, human invention, we got to know later on that it was actually, the inverse of something that's found so naturally occurring, an exponential function. So I thought that's a brilliant thing when we talk about mathematics, and especially when I introduce logarithms in class, I talk about that. But sorry to steal your thunder. Go ahead with what you were saying.
Yeah. Okay. So x squared minus 1 is more than equal to 0. But now if you look at the logarithm, we cannot find log of negative numbers. So what happens here? This more than equal to 0 becomes only more than. We cannot consider equal to 0. So this is our beginning of finding domain. Again, remember, we are discussing here, but this is only 2 marks question. So don't spend too much of time on this, maybe 2 minutes and 15-20 seconds maximum. Now, after this, there are different ways to do this. Either you can do using algebraic reasoning, you can do using the graphical reasoning, you can use your graphic calculator for this. So this is going to be simply x minus 1 times x plus 1 is more than 0. So if you quickly sketch the graph of this negative, you can use number line. I was taught using number line, but I love to teach using this graph. More than zero, so we are looking at above the x-axis. So this part and this part. So this is -1, this is 1. So x will be less than -1 or x is more than +1. We can also do it with the help of a graphic calculator. And if we use a graphic, especially when you're teaching in the classroom, graphic calculator is a brilliant tool to do this. So let's start with a new, oops, what happened here? Sorry, let me close it. I would like to have a new graph here. And in this new graph, I can go to menu. Okay, let's draw the graph. To its x. What is okay? So now what we are doing is we are finding the domain, right? So we just have to look at x squared minus 1 is more than 0. So when you graph, you just have to graph x squared minus 1. So y is equal to x squared minus 1. It is simply, oops, 1. It is a concave up quadratic function. Now, we would like to know for positive ones. So here, more than this point or more than this point. Now, how do we find this point? There is a beautiful tool here, which is called trace. Go to graph trace. And using the graph trace, you can just move onto your graph. Now, what is the beauty here? Why we are discussing here? There are always some important points on the graph. So when you trace, when you slowly scroll down, it tells you when you reach zeros, it tells you, okay, this is your 0. Now, how to mark this 0? You can lock this point by entering. Just enter, and this point is locked to 1, 0. You move down. This is y-intercept. You can lock this also, and you move on. Another 0. This is also locked, and so on and so forth. Now, in this question, you can set your zoom to make it aesthetically pleasing, aesthetically beautiful. So here it is. Now, I'm interested in solving the inequality that x squared minus 1 is more than 0. So what I'll do is I'll go to a new graph out here, menu and graph entry. I'll go for a relation. And in the relation, I'll just write, this is more for teaching in the class. Now, why is it more for teaching in the class? John will discuss in a minute. So x squared minus 1 is more than 0, more than is here. So this is more than and 0. The moment you enter, you see syntax error.
Where are we? You need to determine y also. Is it?
No.
Type it again.
Okay. Oops. X squared minus 1 is more than 0. Yeah, there you go. So you see this part is shaded. So what is the behavior of x coordinate in this part? So it has to be either less than -1 or it has to be more than 1. As I said before, this is good when you teach in the classroom because John, would you like to explore discuss why is it not suitable in the exam?
Indrani just asked the question of where do you get the relation function. You'll have to go to Indrani. You have to go on menu, and the graph entry edit. There are options to enter as a function or as a relation. So you can choose a relation option there. Here's the thing. Jalaj just pointed out quickly about the question being only out of 2 points, and like we said that yes, it is just a 2-pointer, but it's a great opportunity to for us to discuss strategies. So Jalaj, if you just show your question, the inequality, there's so many hidden things, there's this inequality, and like Jalaj was saying, this idea of teaching inequality comes first, right? In your prerequisites, in your algebra, you're teaching students inequality. At that time, you can use the relation mode. I made a video, and for those of you joined a little later on, I made a video emphasizing the idea that in the press to test mode, this thing that Indrani even just now asked us about, how do you enter the relation? Uh, it doesn't work. So if you want to know more about that, please go and watch that video. This is just another way of advertising that. But anyway, just go and watch that video. But here's the thing: as I said in the video, you can enter the relation like Jalaj entered. It allows you. It's not grayed out. The way the press to test works in on the TI Inspire is that some options are grayed out, but some options it allows you. And it's funny that it's not grayed out. You can enter the relationship, meaning you can put an x square minus 1 greater than 0. It allows you. But the moment you hit enter, the key, when you hit enter, it'll say there's a restriction on the press to test mode. So I wanted to help you see that in the class, when you're discovering, you can do that. But and many of us as teachers, when we teach, we have our calculators in a very open mode. We don't have it in exam mode. It's when students start using and then tell us that this is not possible. So I made that video. Go and please check it out. And if there's any questions, or if you find a better way to enter this inequality or an equation, even an equation will not work in the relation mode, by the way, okay, when it's press to test. So I thought I'll just clarify it at that point of time that this method is fantastic when you're doing it in classroom and having this discussion about inequalities, about the largest possible domain, graphical interpretation. It's just 2-pointer when it comes to the exam. So either they do it algebraically. Even when I did the method, if I might just share my work, sorry, where is my work? That's my work. Even I did it algebraically. I would rather first jump into the graphical mode. But what's important, Jalaj, which you can just talk about right now, is the notation.
So in the domain, yeah, exactly. So domain is now x is less than -1 or x is more than 1. Now, if you look at number line goes, it starts from -infinity and it goes up to +infinity. Okay. And another thing is we never reach number line. We can tend to number line. We can go infinitely, infinity. We can go infinitely close to infinity in either direction, but we can never reach. So whenever we say x is less than equal to, more than equal to, with infinity, we never use is equal to. We can never say x is equal to infinity. So out here, x is less than -1 or x is more than 1. It means it comes from -infinity to -1, and of course both brackets, this will be open bracket, and here 1 to infinity. So 1 up to infinity, again it's open because union. This is an open bracket. So if I write a comma b, or an open bracket a b, it is same thing. But when I write a comma b using a square, then A and B both are inclusive. Any other notation, John?
This is good. But what I just wanted to point out, this idea of domain and range that we're talking about, probably that's the first thing that we come across in our classes. What needs to be done also, again, we're taking a 2-point question and we're going to so much of discussion and strategies. When we talk about algebra functions, sometimes we just skim through that algebra functions. We just say, f of x plus g of x, just say, okay, that's f plus g or f times g or whatever that is. Yeah, this happens to be a composite function. What we need to talk also about is how do we can we just add 2 functions? And if we add the 2 functions at random, what about the domains? Can we just add any 2 functions at random, or is there something that we need to take into account of the domain? Because the domain actually is the input. Without the input, you'll never even have a function, you'll never have an output. So this allows for so much scope to talk about under what conditions of the domain can you even combine 2 functions. Composite comes later on, but I'm just talking about f plus g, and this is an example of composing 2 functions where the range of the inner function must be contained within the domain of the other function. So even though it's a 2-marker doing in the exam, the scope for discussion and discovery, using technology and and otherwise. The other thing which we will go on, I'll talk about it later, about writing in words, because now this is all symbols. Encourage children to write with words in class. I'm not talking about write in words, because communication, as you all know, is also one of the keys, right? So with words, this is symbol, this is mathematical communication, but help them to know that they should be able to communicate, describe, which is what I really like about the AI program, Jalaj. There's so much of communication in what they have to interpret, So,
yes.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, great. So this is how we find domain, and there are different ways to write. And in the classroom, when we can use different ways, different methods, so that the students can really visualize what they are doing. But please make sure when you teach them in the class, be very careful that what are the functions which are disabled during examination, so that they're not dependent upon those functions, those specific ways to do. Now, part B is sketch the graph of this. So this one out here, when we sketch, now there are two things. If you see, x has to be either less than -1 or x has to be more than +1. So what happens for the values of x which are lying between 1, -1 to 1 inclusive? So we will visualize it when we sketch it. John, do you want to sketch it in your
Um,
calculator?
Sure. I'll just show, because we're talking about so much with discussion. What I'll do is that I'll just show them what I've already sketched on the calculator. Is there anyone
Okay,
who's
so
not familiar?
what I'll do is let me stop sharing first. You can share your screen. Yeah.
I think my screen is shared. Is there everyone who understands how to sketch, how to enter the graph? Because I prepare templates here so that it'll give us time to talk rather than just if there's anyone who has a question on entering, because somebody asked about where you find that thing, and we want to make sure that your questions are answered. Yes, you cannot sketch the asymptotes. Okay, that's not possible. I put it there, again, for a classroom discussion. You can't sketch the asymptotes. Again, this has to be done on the entry as a relation. Okay, so what I mean by that is I'll quickly, let's see if I have a document, free document open there. There you go. I've got a free document open. So I just go in graphs and I can enter my function as -1 plus ln. So that's under control. That here, and then I need a square root, and I need an x square minus 1. So when I just enter something like that, I'll just get a graph something like that. Okay, and students, screen not shared. All right, so just spotlight. There you go. Can you see now? Yes, great. Do you want me to repeat what I just said?
I can see it's
No,
shared with me.
no. Cool. Do you want me to repeat what I just said, Geeta? Or whoever, they can see this, said, right? No. Okay, cool. So typically, you will not be able to see the
Yes,
asymptotes.
she said. John, sorry, Geeta said yes. Can you repeat it for her quickly?
Okay. All right. Just let me just see. Undo, 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 undo. Okay, there you go. So I've just hit the menu and hit the graph thing quickly, and I'm just entering the function as it is. It's -1 plus. There is an ln. I need to hit Control and this key, and then I want a square root sign. So I go here, x square minus 1. That's the fastest I could take care of it, and I hit enter. I get the graph. I don't see the asymptotes. Okay. Now, this will probably lead us to the discussion of asymptotes. Should we do it here right now, Jalaj, or maybe later on? Jalaj, the discussion on asymptotes, should we keep it for later?
We can do it here.
Because that is another key thing. Because you see, we start a domain, and algebraically, when you're finding the domain, like Jalaj pointed out about the radical, the square root sign, and the square root is defined only when the term inside the radical is greater than or equal to 0. We also need to take into account when the denominator becomes 0, and that's when the first time the kids understand it, we get into the discussion of what actually happens. What is this thing called asymptotes? So the vertical asymptote, this is a very important, and maybe let's just give a minute before we get into this discussion on that. Let's give a minute and say, what is it that you use to define a vertical asymptote? What do you say in words? Let's try it out in this group that we have over 37 teachers in our group right now. What do you say about a vertical asymptote? How do you define uh, in words? Let's just share. Okay, meanwhile I'll just try and draw the vertical asymptote how I drew it, so that you can see that. Jalaj, no need to close screen share. Okay, you don't need to. I'll just show it. In the meanwhile, if you can just put in the chat, how do you describe in your class a vertical asymptote? Okay, the others, I go on menu, I'm using relation. Remember this option, even
Value
if
of
you
x when domain.
go on.
One answer is value of x when domain does not exist.
Ah,
Domain
okay,
does not exist. Okay, where okay when it moves parallel to y-axis but doesn't touch y-axis.
okay.
Okay, why
Mm-hmm.
y-axis? Maybe a vertical line. not necessarily y-axis,
But it's
not
good. But
necessarily
it's good.
y-axis.
Good to know all this. When it moves back. Oh,
Pro-
okay.
yeah, probably you mean that as x is more than equal to in, okay, the function does not meet vertical line when it moves parallel to y, okay, as x more than equal to y, getting closer to, mhm, or y more than equal to infinity, negative infinity, what x getting closer to, okay.
Here's the thing I would like people to understand. I know there's the concept of limits. I've taught AP primarily, so I really like the
Where
curriculum because
the denominator, yeah,
has anyone
where the
tried?
denominator of rational functions tend to zero,
Has anyone used the idea of limits to do? Yes, Hassan just brought it up. Has anyone
where
used the idea
limit
of
doesn't exist. Hassan,
has anyone else used limits in the classroom when you're talking about vertical and horizontal asymptotes? Thank you. As x
as
tends to.
x tends to a, where y does not exist.
What does the word tends to mean, Jalaj? I'm talking to you as a student now. ये tends to क्या है?
Tends to is you're inclined to. You go infinitely close to something,
हाँ,
but you never meet.
but it is never equal.
That is tends to tendency. What is your tendency?
हाँ. I think,
Tendency,
I
or
think
say you go infinitely close to something, but
हाँ.
you never meet. Approaching.
I'm going to switch back to my camera. Here's the thing,
So
I
when I say
like
x tends to,
हाँ.
yeah, carry on,
No, what I try to do is that
go on.
when children are talking about graphs, what I do in my class is that I use these words before I bring in the idea of limits, because वो तो बाद में आता है, like I said, domain, the algebra of domain is there, and people are putting in fantastic comments. The line approaches, the line graphs approaches, but never meet. Oh, interesting. We want to talk about Arif's point in a minute, okay? But here's the thing. Uh, I try and give the idea with limits, and I say, okay, one is what happens when x is approaching a finite value, okay, x approaches a, but the y values shoot up beyond a limit, meaning I don't like to use the word infinity right away, but I said as x approaches a finite value, what happens when I try to tell them, can you sketch the idea? Can you draw rather than giving them that vertical asymptote? I say, can you draw a scenario when x is approaching a finite value, the y values become really like go without bound. You get what I'm saying? And then tell them the converse. I said, okay, what happens when x approaches a higher values, end behavior? I bring that word, end behavior of the function. What happens at the end? What, when x approaches infinite value, is there a possibility, or I ask them to draw a case, think about drawing a case when x is approaching higher values, maximum values, can you sketch where f will approach a finite value, that there will be a bound? So it gives, when you bring the idea of limit to students, they go blank. Perhaps yes, and maybe you want to expound on that, Marie. Why you use approach instead? Great. Sometimes we need to watch our own words. We sometimes come up with the idea that we have done our mathematics, we've done our masters, so we expect them to understand our lingo, our vocabulary. But this is such an important thing that when we talk about something basic as asymptotes, we need to see how they're understanding. Okay, very good that people are pointing out screen not visible, sir. uh, I don't know which screen. It can show very nicely using the table function of TI. Excellent. Yes. Even in the TI, we can show what, as Mrs. Naik said, that you can. No screen is shared right now. Hassan is saying that, but even in the table of values, you can actually show, and I'll show that right away. Okay. So that's cam 2. I can actually go and turn on the table. Okay. And I can show it on the split screen, and you can see what's actually happening at 1. If you go and run through, and can make through that, allowing students to see what's happening. That it's not defined in those values. Okay, so you could actually even allow students to say that it's undefined, and so these are different ways to introduce asymptotes, Jalaj. Whether it's the table of values, the language we use,
Yep,
the
exactly.
idea of limits. Whether it is the end behavior when you're talking about a horizontal asymptote. But someone made an interesting point. I just wanted to comment on that, Jalaj, before we go on. Someone said it does not cross. I think it was Arif. I'm not really sure about that. It does not cross. Do you want to say something about that, Jalaj?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
When it comes to vertical asymptote, when we have function approaching a value for a specific value of x, then I mean vertical asymptotes will never intersect with the graph. But when it comes to horizontal asymptote or a vertical, I mean oblique
Oblique.
asymptote, they may intersect graph. A horizontal asymptote maybe an asymptote to the graph for in a certain interval, but in other interval it may intersect also.
And the reason and the best and
Maybe we can draw a graph and show it. Let me share my screen and show it to you how it goes.
well, Jalaj is drawing that, getting that ready.
Um,
The reason we need to understand, see, horizontal
okay,
asymptote is
so
end behavior. It may cross before it gets into that kind of behavior. You know, if you look at in terms of behavior. So, Jalaj will draw something and show us.
have a look at this. If we have a graph, say x minus 3, simply x minus 3 divided by x squared minus 4. Now out here, if you see, it seems so what will be the asymptote here?
So you got x is equal to 3
Horizontal
minus
asymptote.
horizontal asymptote
So horizontal asymptote will
0.
be
The
1.
x-axis, yeah.
Is
Uh,
it?
x-axis, y is equal to 0. The vertical asymptote,
X-axis. Yep, x-axis 0. But if you see at x is equal to 3, there will be an intersection here. So if you zoom in out here, if I make a zoom box in this part, we can see out here at this point, the horizontal asymptote is intersecting the graph,
yeah, yeah.
right? So simply, for horizontal asymptote, we can check um, the points. So first we find the horizontal asymptote and we just find the point of intersection of graph and the horizontal asymptote. And when I say horizontal asymptote intersects the graph at some point, it doesn't mean it has to intersect. There are cases when it does, there are cases when it doesn't. So will it intersect? Just solve the equation. So you write your equation is equal to the horizontal asymptote. If that equation gives you a real solution, it does intersect. If you don't get a real solution, there will be no intersection, simply. Similarly, it happens for oblique asymptote.
Jalaj, I'm going to share this activity.
So,
Hassan, if you can just show this screen right now. This activity is available on the Math Inspired website. Okay, there's also a teacher's write-up. The student handout is also available, but it's a great exploration, especially when you're doing rationals and polynomial functions, and then you're doing rational functions, so that students understand where they can actually find out under what conditions. Okay, so it can also seem like a good investigation. I know we at one point in time we spoke about a mini IA, and so we don't even have to think of an IA something like that. But this is a great activity where students can actually look at for what value of A B would it even cross, so, and they can write down a conjecture. Meaning you can even put them into groups, and if it's around this online. During this lockdown, and I've always said encourage students to use their software. This is one way to give them and put them into breakout rooms, and they can come up with some kind of conjecture, some kind of an idea, and they can explore the idea when, under what conditions will it cross the horizontal asymptote. Go on, Jalaj, let's continue.
yeah. Okay, so in the
Where is
next
this
part of the
activity?
question, it
Hassan, can you just
says,
answer that question? Where is this activity? They wanted to know where is that activity available. They can go and download it. Go on. Hassan will put it on the
yeah,
chat.
sure.
Yeah.
So moving on, Sorry, let me share my screen again. Hassan, I'll remember now to not to turn it off, the sharing part. Okay, so the next part of the question is sketch the graph of the function. So we saw like in the sketch, it was something like this. Oops. And it was like this. This was negative 2.9, this was 2.9, and one more thing we should emphasize in the classroom, that asymptotes are always marked using these dotted lines. Anything in math that is not inclusive, we usually use dotted lines. This was part B. Now, the part C is a simple question, 1 mark question. Explain why f is an even function. Now, for f to be an even function, remember it is just 1 mark question. So either you can simply write it is not for even function. We have to look at the reflection. Basically, in the even function, when f of negative x and fx are equal, then it is an even function. Now, when you look at this graphically, when you replace negative x for x, and nothing happens, means reflection in the y-axis. So out here we can see on the screen, when you reflect this function in the y-axis, then both parts overlap each other perfectly. They just fall on each other. So I think that is enough to write to get 1 mark, that this curve is symmetric about y-axis,
That's
or you can
also
just write f
yeah.
of negative x is equal to fx. That will be enough. What do you think, John?
Yeah, that's good. I mean, and this is also a good place for
Yeah, just 1 mark.
yeah, yeah. And in class, when you're doing it,
And in part,
encourage kids to even write with words, like I said, so this is simple, but
yes,
they should be able to
exactly.
write with words, as I mentioned before, great opportunities at the beginning of the year to emphasize on communication, written
Right.
communication.
And next part is explain why the inverse function f inverse does not exist. So it is not a one function. This is also 1 mark question. Explain why the inverse function does not exist. Simply, it is a one function. Or if you wish, you can means you can write about the horizontal line
Horizontal line
test.
test, yeah.
For in horizontal line test, for a value of y, we get more than one value of x. Or simply write it is not a one function. Or you may write it is a many to one function. Next part of the function question is 4 marks. The function g is defined by gx is equal to negative 1 plus ln. Okay, it is same function. Is it same function? It is
It
same
is the same,
function.
it's restricted.
Okay. Find the inverse function, and now it is from 1 to infinity. So it is 1 to infinity. So we are looking at this part of the function now. So we are looking at this 1 to infinity. So for this part of function, find the inverse and state its domain. So do we really need to do this, John?
I think this is a little self-explanatory,
Yes. So
but we'll go into the other ones where you're using the analytical way of finding the domain, because this is 4 points. Maybe I can just show the working quickly, because may I do that? My part, I can just show them my working on that.
yeah, please go
Yeah,
ahead.
can everyone see that what I've shared? And I think Jalaj, you need to stop sharing first.
Yes, I'll do that.
There you go. So this was the question which Jalaj was just talking about, the function g, the same function that is now restricted to the right side, okay, domain from 1 to infinity, open interval 1 to infinity. I don't know, I got into a habit of writing open interval with this parenthesis, so I know that IB emphasizes this other notation, but I tend to use this notation quite often. But I don't know, is there anyone who's taught AP or any other course where they use the same IB notation? Whenever it comes to notations, I just get very curious, okay, because this is the first time I saw when I started teaching IB this kind of notation for open interval. But I just went ahead and did the algebraic way. I did not find the inverse the other way around. But this is what needs to be written down. This is domain of G is limited to 1 infinity. You're just taking care of the positive root and the domain of G inverse, because E you're looking at the domain of exponential function, including all the real numbers. That should be the domain of G inverse. Okay, so that's kind of self-explanatory. Shall we move to the second question, Jalaj? Yeah. Can we move to the second question?
And also, like, we
Or
can
would you
add
like?
here
Huh.
in part E. So when inverse function exists, so when we find the domain of it,
Huh.
so that is going to be the range of the main function.
I was thinking we'll talk about that in the analytical part, because that's a very clever way of putting it. Because sometimes we just use, I thought, many times we're used to the algebra. I've just processed it out. But anyway,
Okay.
since you brought it out right now, go ahead and talk about it, because we need to talk about the different ways to arrive at that domain and the range. Okay, so I've laid it out algebraically, and Jalaj, there's one example that comes later on where he was just saying, okay, just we can do it analytically. You want to just talk about that, Jalaj, quickly?
We'll talk about that later.
In the
That's
latest
okay.
example? Okay, cool. So shall we go to the
Yes.
next
So we can
question?
continue with the next question.
Okay. Here's the question. The question is a function is defined, again, it's a rational function, and we've got the numerator, denominator, and they've not specified what the domain is. It just said x is D, belongs to D. D is for domain, all right? And the question again is about the domain. We've spoken so much about domain. Domain took us to definitions of asymptote. It has to, it must. Okay, open interval, closed interval, what's allowed, what's not allowed. In fact, when we talk about the interval notation, we often even talk about increasing, decreasing when we're talking about the increasing, decreasing function in our class, Jalaj. So they often ask, why are we talking increasing, decreasing with open intervals? Has anyone asked you that question?
Now,
Why are we not using a closed interval to describe what I'm talking about? Like if you say um, f is increasing on the interval a, why do we only use open there and not closed interval? When you're talking increasing, decreasing, I think I went ahead into some other direction, but all I'm saying is that these kind of have this
see,
kind of bolo.
like for increasing function at every point, the derivative has to be positive.
Correct.
And when we look at the endpoints,
Ah.
then the derivative will not exist, because we don't have one side of,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
either right hand or left hand derivative.
Correct, correct.
So we do not close it. We
But
keep
here,
it open,
but here's the
actually.
question. Here's the question, Jalaj, and I think Marie said the same thing. We are talking at
I
a
mean,
time.
this is 1%.
Correct. But hear me out, Marie, Jalaj, great answers. But this is when we are talking in terms of function. I'm talking about a case when, let's say, we have not even come to differentiation. वो तो बाद में आएगा. That'll come later on, Marie. Okay. So when you're only talking about functions, the introductory part, you're doing domain, and you've taught them about interval notations, and you're talking, key features of the graph, and you give them the idea of increasing. You're not. I don't know whether you've done. You started whether you teach about increasing, decreasing just from the key features of the graph, or do you wait only after you do calculus? So at that time, if you were to do something like that, how would you answer that question, Jalaj? Or anyone who's willing to shed light on it? Because
Okay.
imagine you're not done calculus, you're not done differentiation.
So I just use the, like, proportion. How are they changing?
Huh.
X and Y, they increasing, decreasing in the same direction.
Huh.
Direct proportion, inverse proportion.
Huh.
But honestly, I had never thought of this. That why do we always keep open? So I'll
Here's
do some more research on this when
huh.
I go to the class next.
Acha, acha. But in the comments, if if anyone is here, just okay. If it is a point where the function stops increasing or decreasing, hence the name. True. Okay, but something to think about. All right, because I have local extreme and global points. Yes.
Yes, it is very interesting.
It is. And the reason I'm saying these things is because this is the fundamental thing. Now we're talking about, like, our topic is today, basics to beyond. And when you talk about beyond, you start with the basic ideas, give them the graphs. You're talking with the graphs, and allow them to express. Anyway, so I just went all over there after introducing this question, just looking at that x belongs to D. And question is very similar to what we did earlier. It said, determine capital D, which was the domain, the largest possible domain of f. It was just for 2 points. I'll erase this part. It is just for 2 points. If it's a 2-pointer, I've always gone for the calculator. But for this workshop, I even laid it out graphically. I always do things. I also did it algebraically. Sorry. If it's a 2-pointer, always jump for calculator, Jalaj. I don't know why. Like you said, I'm always thinking technology that way. So I'd rather use the technology for this. But the largest possible domain, again, you can. This is what I've done algebraically. If everyone can see the work, typically when I'm teaching in class, I try to, like I said, I try to help them see what is the algebra involved, So there's an exponential function happening in the numerator. There's a term in the denominator with the exponential function. What are the problems? What kind of x is not allowed in, what's the problem with the numerator? When, what terms will not be allowed? When is it not possible in the denominator? And using that idea, if I come to this conclusion that when you say e to the x is not equal to half, well, that is what's going to make the denominator 0, then what would be the value of x that, that needs to be excluded to make the domain permissible? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anyone has any other ideas? Please shoot on the on the comments. How do you explain increasing, decreasing without calculus? Excellent. Excellent. Shall I answer that question or shall I go ahead with this? Jalaj?
Yeah, I think go ahead.
Yeah. Mrs. Naik also says increasing, decreasing concepts become clearer when we introduce derivatives. Please answer. Yes, I'm going to answer this right now. I wanted to. So what I do is that I can everyone see the graph? Okay. Primitive idea, basic idea, and remember we're just looking at the graphs. We're just looking at the graphs. And yes, it will not be as strong an answer as once would you understand calculus, but let's just just use a graph, okay, something like that, and I just ask intuitively. I just ask for an intuitive idea. Let's just put a value a here. Let's put a value of b here, and when I say intuitive, I'm just saying based on what they see. I say, when do you think the graph is increasing? And I'm telling you, 9 out of 10 times the students say, for values between a and b, kids can understand just visually, intuitively. They'll say, yahan se increase ho rahi hai. Okay, but giving them a condition something like this, and perhaps you may have come across this definition before, but let me know what you say. Okay, I'd say something like this: for x1 greater than x2, if there are two values in that, let's put it the other way around. Okay, for x1 less than x, so that it's increasing values. So if I have an x1 here, imagine, and there's an x2 here. Okay, so x2 is obviously, if f of x1 is less than f of x2. Can you see this, everyone, this definition? Is everyone seeing this? Okay. If I use this idea, because at this point in time, we're only talking about, the kids have just studied some basic idea of functions, domains, inequality they have done. We're playing around with inequality. So I think even if we can introduce something like this, it might not be calculus, it'll get solidified later on. And at the same time, you can say, all right, this would then mean that it's increasing, because you've already told them that, okay, you've asked them visually, hey, look at the graph and tell me where do you think it's increasing. So if you can take two values and the corresponding y values are also having the same behavior, use the same words, behavior, it's an increasing behavior. On the other hand, if you have x1 less than x2 for the same idea, and for those values, if f of x1 is greater than f of x2, sorry, that should be f of x2, then you can conclude a possible behavior called decreasing. I want to hear your thoughts. Come on, somebody should argue with me.
Yeah, this is what I meant when I said the trend, the proportion, how x and y are they increasing in the same direction or opposite direction.
Yes, yes. And Marie made a very interesting point. Marie made a very interesting point. She said, that's the problem with math teachers. I just said something earlier.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we come in, we think that they're all at this R level and we want to explain from that level. But we need to also, we're going with them. We are exploring, we are discovering the language of math, the new concepts with them, and allow them to ask the questions and not go into the class thinking and that we have to give the information, when you study calculus you'll understand it better. Sometimes that becomes a habit of some teachers saying that just wait for 2 months and you'll understand everything better. But go with them with their own understandings, with the idea of the inequalities. They probably have only studied inequality like that, which is why many times sorry Jalaj, I'm just going
yeah, go on It's very interesting.
So if this green graph represents f of x, and I just draw another graph on it, another different color, okay, and I draw another color, and I just ask them intuitively, I said, which graph is greater than the other one? If I call the gx, blue graph, and I said, which one is greater? Obviously, there's no algebra involved. There's no table of values involved. But intuitively, they tell me that gx is greater than f of x. Then what I do is that then I just change the graph slightly, and I say, all right, now if that was g, let's just erase that, and I make g slightly different with some points of intersection. I ask this question: when is g greater than f? You see, everything can be brought with points of intersection and inequalities in the pre-calculus era, in the time when you're building up functions. Allow for these explorations and get the responses from them, because when you do when they start doing calculus, when they start investigating calculus, they will make the connections with the pre-calculus. That's why it's called pre-calculus. It does not explain though why the local minima and local maxima are not included in the interval. Good point, ma'am. Because without using the word local maxima and minima, if you just stop there, that's why I use those what do you call it, A and B, I mean, in that region. So after I give this definition or this kind of an idea, I ask them, what do you think is happening here then? What is happening at that point? Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? What can you say? I ask them, okay, if you're telling me that the function is increasing for these values here, what is happening there? Is it increasing? I invite a discussion, and some say it's happening both. I've even heard that kind of a response, that it's both happening. At that point of time, allow for that. Let them discuss. That time you don't have to say that there is a lot can be done through trends, plotting of points, and even absolutely, yeah. But don't give away these words of local. I mean, we can talk about increasing, decreasing, and maxima. We can say, I mean, in that region, it is a maximum value. What happens at a maximum value is a function still increasing. I think what needs to come out is this. Hear me out again before you guys start throwing stones at me. But I want to hear somebody, okay? I mean, if you disagree, please, it's also okay. I try and keep this as the objective, that maxima, minima, let's rephrase that sentence. While increasing, decreasing is a behavior over an interval, happening over an interval, maxima, minima happens at a point, it's a local behavior. I'll repeat what I said. While increasing, decreasing happens over an interval, maxima, minima is a localized behavior. Does that make sense?
Wonderful, yeah.
So without giving those words of turning point and maximum, whatever, stationary point and all that, this part of the understand as behavior. That will be great. Cool.
Lovely.
Jalaj, if you want to continue with the three asymptotes in this question, there are those three asymptotes, okay?
Sure.
I'll just show the question to everyone, because so it says.
I just shared with Hassan.
Okay.
Hassan, could you please share this with everyone?
All right.
Yeah. Okay. So next part of the question is show that graph has three asymptotes and state their equations. So can you show the graph, please, John?
Me. Okay.
Yeah. Can you show the graph of this function? Yeah. This is the one, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if you see here, there are two. I can see there are two horizontal asymptotes here, and there is one vertical asymptote. Now, how do we find what are the asymptotes here? We have to show that, and this is the 5 marks question. What 5 marks? So,
Jalaj, I'm going to pretend to a student. How can you say there are two asymptotes?
Okay, so first thing is we look for simply, is there any vertical asymptote? First, I always start with vertical asymptote. So put denominator 0. So when 2 e raised to the power of x minus 1 is equal to 0, e raised to the power of x is equal to half, 1 by 2. So x is equal to negative ln 2. So negative ln 2 is less than negative 1. So okay, can you move your cursor on the second asymptote, horizontal asymptote?
Oh, you want me to go down? Okay.
Move your cursor. No. In your diagram.
Okay, sorry.
Or what do you do is let me share my screen.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so Okay, out here, I don't remember how was it. Was it like this, John? Correct me if.
It's the other
Um,
way. Oh no, sorry, this is correct. This is correct. No, it was. It's coming from the.
okay, approximately like
Yeah,
this.
yeah, 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 something like that.
Okay, lovely. Okay, so if we see, the question says, show that there are three asymptotes. 5 marks question, and the equation is y is equal to 2 minus e raised to the power of x over 2 e raised to the power of x minus 1, right? So when you put this denominator 0, then this gives you x is equal to ln half, which is negative of ln 2. So that is going to be somewhere here. Oops. So let me change the color. Let me make it green. So this is your, let's go green. This is your first one, negative ln 2, right? Now, when it comes to vertical asymptote, in vertical asymptote, we see what happens when this one, when out here, oops, sorry, I think I made some mistake here. This, this is a vertical asymptote, so it should be here. Right, John?
The vertical asymptote is happening at x
It
is
has
equal.
to be vertical here. Come on.
Huh.
It's common sense, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when x tends to infinity, what happens here? If you look at this closely, when x tends to infinity, then e raised to the power of x tends to infinity.
Hmm.
So e raised to the power of negative x tends to 0. This happens when x tends to infinity. Right. Now out here, we see in the domain, we have negative x, negative infinity, and we have positive infinity. So when x tends to positive infinity, e raised to the power of x tends to 0. So e raised to the power of negative x tends to, sorry, when x tends to infinity, e raised to the power of x tends to infinity. So e raised to the power of negative x tends to 0. So this gives you y is equal to, can we make it 2 e raised to the power of negative x minus 1 divided by 2 minus e raised to the power of negative x. So when e raised to the power of negative x tends to infinity, then you have y is equal to negative half. Making sense?
It is.
Okay.
Um, Go on.
So this is negative half. So y is equal to negative half. The other one was x is equal to negative ln 2. Now the third one, when x tends to negative infinity. Now here we had x tends to infinity. What if x tends to negative infinity?
Hmm.
Then this one straight away will give you 2 upon
Hmm.
negative 1. So negative 2.
Hmm.
Isn't it? So this will give you y is equal to negative 2 when x tends to negative infinity.
May I just show another algebra that I used? I
Yeah,
used a different algebra.
one moment, one
Yeah.
moment. So you have y is equal to negative 2. So these are three asymptotes. One is vertical, and instead of one, we have two horizontal asymptotes here.
Hmm.
And this is, I think this is the first question. I never seen two horizontal asymptotes in any question. There can be multiple vertical
Hmm.
asymptotes, but
Hmm.
when it comes to horizontal asymptotes, this is the first question where I'm seeing two horizontal asymptotes. Usually it's either one horizontal asymptote or oblique asymptote, but having two horizontal asymptotes in one question, in Indonesian we say luar biasa.
Hmm.
Yeah, please. You are saying something, John?
No, I just wanted to share the. I mean, this algebra is nothing wrong. It's everything correct. But you just pointed out about the two horizontal asymptotes that's happening, right?
Yep.
Uh, uh, may I just share my screen?
Yes.
Uh, it is important to consider both what's happening at the right end and what's happening at the left end. Okay, so the same thing that Jalaj said, I would have done the same thing. But this is a little technique that I'd studied that, when you're talking about end behavior, like when you talk about x approaches infinity, you're talking about the end behavior. You can ignore, see, when you say, like Jalaj said, when x approaches infinity, e to the x is also going to grow. As x grows beyond bound, e to the x is also going to grow beyond bound. So when you're combining a high number, x is becoming large, e to the x is also becoming large, that 2 is not going to contribute much. It's like saying, 2 plus. So you could ignore. Okay, we're looking at the behavior. I'm not saying it's going to be equal to. Limits is about behavior, all right? So you could, that's why I use the symbol equivalent. You could ignore the 2 and say this is just like the behavior of negative e to the x. Can you see that? At the same time, in the denominator, as x becomes large, really large, the term that's only going to matter is the 2e to the x. Minus 1 is not going to make, it's like, imagine 10 million, minus 1, we are looking at the behavior. So
True.
this term will only reduce to this, which then automatically reduces to just negative half. So it's just another way of evaluating limits. I know that we don't do much on evaluating limits, but I'm not just talking about the function, the algebra of limits here. I'm talking about, they're understanding, they're explaining that what end behavior means. That when something is increasing beyond bound, what happens? Because when you just get stuck to algebra, when you just get stuck to like, okay, you divide, then what happens is that we then are forced to think that limit has a value that is it's not about approaching or tending to, it's equal to, and then I think that's where the confusion is. But if you work this way, that hey, the term that's going to really make most of the difference is that e to the x. So you could compare this to, it's when, for those of you who've done comparison tests and in the earlier curriculum, you'd probably see a similarity in that, how we can compare this function to that function. John, does board accept the working you have shown? Accept, you mean? Yeah, why not?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
John,
Yes, sir.
about your this thing, I have a question. Like, what you showed, it is like using L'Hopital rule,
Correct.
right?
Absolutely, yeah. I
But
didn't use it,
but
but
if you see, like, when the numerator in numerator, can you show your slide again?
one side.
Where you, yeah.
Yeah.
So out here, when numerator, when x tends to infinity, this is going to be an indeterminate form, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Infinity or infinity form.
So is it
But understand,
legitimate to
Jalaj,
cancel e raised to the power of x?
understand, Jalaj, ye kya na, you are right, it's going through the indeterminate, but I am trying to teach it before I've taught calculus.
Okay.
मैं वो perspective से लेके आ रहा हूँ. So in that we can use the idea of the behavior. I know when they have done differentiation, then we can bring in all those cool things that we spoke about, the max, the min, and all those things. But in this time, when you're forming, all the formative ideas of functions are there, this
Okay.
idea will really make sense.
True.
I don't know. We'd like to hear people. There are so many people here in our very quiet today. Some of them are speaking, but I really want to hear from other people. I can see Mr. Andavar there.
There is a question from Purva.
Purva, what does she say?
John, does board accept the working you have shown?
I don't see why they should not. If they can accept graphical responses, they should accept
Yeah, they should actually. Yeah, I agree with you. And in this one, to show that this horizontal one, there is one more approach. Like,
Yeah.
if you divide by, can I show my screen here? So share my screen. This one. Okay. So what I do here is, in this question, it was,
Jalaj,
yep.
can you check my comment? In that, rather than canceling out e raised to the power x, can we bring denominator to numerator and vice versa, and
Exactly,
it will make
exactly. That
e
is
raised
what
to the
I
minus
was
x?
going to
Yeah.
show.
Okay.
So if you have y is equal to 2 minus e raised to the power of x over 2 e raised to the power of x minus 1. See, when x tends to infinity, that's what like I try to show down here. When x tends to infinity, e raised to the power of x tends to infinity. But if e raised to the power of x is infinity, e raised to the power of x will tend to 0. So we can use this concept here, and what we can do, as like Hassan mentioned, we can bring e raised to the power, we can move it. Otherwise, simply divide numerator and denominator by e raised to the power of x. If it is the algebraic function, you just divide by the highest power if it is a polynomial function. So this will be 2 e raised to the power of negative x minus 1 over 2 minus e raised to the power of negative x. Now, when e raised to the power of negative x tends to 0, this is gone, this is gone. So we are left with negative half. And when x tends to negative infinity, we just don't need to do anything. Just plug in the value out here and get the answer. So, but I like, John, your idea also, like before teaching them calculus, just to have some idea
Yeah, yeah.
how it may work. So that is great, actually. Yeah.
There is a question Anjan Chaudhary has asked, can we get the asymptotes? I think what he's asking is, can we get the equations of the asymptotes? Is that what you're asking, Anjan? Can you just say, give me a yes or no? Can we get it directly from the calculator? Yeah, he's talking about that. Can you get the...
Can how do Yogita? Can you re-explain how we get y is equal to negative 2? Yeah, absolutely. So for y is equal to negative 2, we don't need to do any algebraic manipulation. So I think I'm just being a bit lazy to open a new page. So let me show it to you here only. So this was a main equation, right? So when x tends to negative infinity, e raised to the power of negative x tends to 0. So you just put it here, and what do you get? Langsung, you get straight away, I mean, alatul, 2 minus 0 over 0 minus 1, that is negative 2. I hope this answers your question, Yogita.
Jalaj, may I just suggest something?
Yes, sure, go ahead.
Okay, the next parts of this question, if we may skip and go to the next question, which is about that the quartic with the decimals and talking about the solutions of the inequality.
Sure.
Okay, because variety ke liye.
I would like to just quickly go through part C and
Okay, okay,
D,
go ahead, go
maybe
ahead.
in next 1 minute or two.
ठीक
Part
है
C
let
is
time
show that f prime is there, so you just have to find the first derivative. So we are not doing it. So
I
you
didn't
can
want to
find.
do I didn't want to do derivatives today. I just wanted to keep it to that's why I said you can skip
Yeah.
that by.
So let's not do this. And in part D, use the answer of part B and C to justify that f has an inverse and state its domain. Now, if we see the derivative, I hope everyone has access to these questions. So, Hassan, have you shared these questions?
Yeah, I have shared it.
Lovely. So in part C, if you see f prime, that is first derivative is negative of a combination of e raised to the power of x, all positives. So e raised to the power of negative x is combinations will never be negative. Denominator is squared. So the first derivative is always negative. When it is always negative, it means, sorry, John, but in the derivative, if you see, if the first if the first derivative is negative, your function has to be a decreasing function. So your function is strictly decreasing throughout. If it is strictly decreasing, means there is no turning
Turning
point.
point.
If there is no turning point, there is no scope of function not being 1 1. Right? If it is not turning, means there won't be any repetition of x values. For each y value, you will have only one x value. Also, since function is differentiable in this domain, so there is no discontinuity also, either like value or jump discontinuity. So in this case, function will surely have an inverse for this domain. And next is find an expression for inverse function, again 4 marks, but it is a simple like just interchange x and y, make y subject to formula, and you get your answer. Okay,
Just out
so
of curiosity, Jalaj, because you use the words, okay, and no problem. I was trying just to keep the whole webinar today within the realms of functions. If everyone has observed that that we're trying our best not to get involved with calculus. You know that introductory phases, the basics. We're just trying our best. Yes, there's a lot of things that we can answer from calculus perspective, but how do you present? How do you keep the discussions in the classroom using all these questions and extending those ideas? That's where I'm coming from. But Jalaj, in what you were saying, something hit my ear. I want to ask you this question. Do you do continuity in your class? Do you talk about continuity?
In higher level, yes, definitely I do.
Okay. Why not ASL? Why is this discrimination?
It is not discrimination
No,
actually.
I'm
I
just
would
kidding. I'm
love
just
to.
using.
I would
uh,
love to teach them, but
uh,
it is not relevant for them because at standard level they are not going to discuss the deep discussion of those fine concepts where
huh.
they can use the derivative or the calculus for the modeling or for the investigation.
नहीं calculus तो छोड़ो मैं I'm talking continuity because and I want to hear from our group here also, okay, because he used the word jump discontinuity and all those things, and there isn't, you would see even in our question papers, because it's not, yeah, thank you Sonia for mentioning that, but in terms of conceptual understanding, preparation towards going towards calculus and beyond, I feel, this is just my perspective, Jalaj. Okay, I feel that I don't mind taking that extra one or two classes just to talk about continuity and whichever group I have. So that has been my practice, and yeah, I just was curious because you mentioned those words, and yeah,
I tell you, John, what
yeah,
happens if you see like an exploration criteria, exploration criteria. Criterion B is communication. That is worth 4 marks,
correct.
right? In communication, and A is presentation. That is also worth 4 marks. So 40%, 40% revolves around writing good mathematics, using appropriate notations, terminology. So what happens here is like if when I practice these, like I use lots of mathematical terms, jump continuity as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So I always use these mathematical terms in the class. So what happens? It rubs upon the students also, and in the class, it comes naturally to them. So when
Right.
they
Right.
do any assessment,
Okay.
especially in exploration,
Correct.
so it goes very smoothly. They don't have to really force them to use mathematical terms, concepts or skills, and
Sure.
they never struggle.
Right.
So I make it a habit that they must use as much as they can use.
Okay. Okay.
So it came naturally, actually. I had no intention.
Shall we move to that question three?
Yes,
That
let's
was.
move on to the next
We're
question.
moving to the next question. This is great, everyone, and we had really planned a lot. Maybe we won't be able to go beyond this third question, but this has also got a lot of meat to it. But as much as possible, let's try and keep it, like I said, within the realms of piecewise linear function can be sometimes pieces continuous.
Okay, so
Okay.
are you going or shall I go?
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay, so this is the question. Uh, Fine.
True.
Why is it? Why is it not responding here? Okay, fine. Let me read the question first loudly here. So the question is, fx is equal to x raised to the power of 4 plus 0.2 x cube. So it is basically a quartic of expression, quartic polynomial, and part A is find the solution of the inequality where your function is more than 0. So this is, we can do this completely from our calculator. So what I'll do is I'll open a new calculator page. We need to do this using the graphs and other thing, means graphically, but I'm still going to define my function first. So let's say my function fx, I'm defining first so that I don't need to type it again and again. I define this as, is it here? I copied that time. Oh my God, I need to type again. Never mind, I'll do this. So this is x raised to the power of 4 plus 0.2 x cubed. So 0.2.
You missed a plus. You missed a plus.
Did I? Okay, plus 0.2 x cubed. X cubed. Typing in calculator is faster. Minus 5.8 minus 5.8 x squared. So here is your x squared minus x plus 4 minus x plus 4 and enter. Once you enter, it is done. So I have defined my function as fx here. Now I'll go to a new page. My page will be a graph page now. I have to find solution for fx more than equal to 0. So first I'll just write fx, and how do we know whether I'm putting correct function? Just see if your function f is in bold, means this function has been taken from here, which I defined before. If it is not bold, means there is something wrong here in this one. So fx, so when I sketch, it looks like this. Now, before we start solving it, there are a few things I would like to do. Number one is I would like to see my functions through, oops, sorry. It should look very aesthetic. So I always do this. I'll create a zoom box so that I don't see any unwanted part. So I'll be basically working in this part. So here, second thing, I would like to find these important points. What are intercepts, turning point, and all those things. So let's do this. How do we do this? Easiest way is go to menu and trace. Graph trace. Just move it, and this is one of the zeros. Lock it. How to lock it? Just enter. Move on. This is minimum point. It reads minimum automatically. Enter. This one again 0. Enter. Move on. This is y-intercept. We don't actually need maximum. If you need y-intercept, go ahead and lock it also. Minimum 0. Now we don't need minimum maximum now, but in the next part we might require. So I'm using it. Okay, so this is our function, right? Okay.
Could you move the coordinates a little bit? Aesthetically, it might be a bit more pleasing.
I'll do that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah, I like it this way. Okay, so we have to find the solution of fx more than equal to 0, only more than 0, not more than equal to 0. Means we are looking at above the x-axis. So above the x-axis, so it has to be less than this point, or between -1 and 0.8, or more than this point, right? So we can do this. Otherwise, what we can do is we can go back here. And once again, like, you will be using this only in the class for the discussion. You cannot use this in the exam. So I'll go to tab, go to menu, and in graph entry, I'll put a relation, and my relation is going to be, or I can just write fx, because I had defined fx before, more than 0. Where is more than? More than is right here. So more than 0, more than 0. And once I enter this, you see this highlighted part is your answer. So it has to be either less than -1, or between -1 and 0.8, or 2.24 onwards. This is 3 marks question. So I think this much of work is enough for this. I'm not writing. We can write it like using open intervals, union of first part, second set, and the third set, right? Now, second part of the question is for this curve, which is y is equal to this quartic curve, find the coordinates of both local minimum points. Part B1 and B2 is find x coordinates of point of inflection. So part B is 5 marks question, where you find coordinates of local minimum points and x coordinates of the points of inflection. This is the paper 2 question. So you're not expected to differentiate and solve this cubic equation. What you can do is, let me go back, and I don't need this one. Okay, so out here. So if we see from the graph, local minimum, where is local minimum? One is here and one is here. So you have 2 local minima here, one is negative, and you are asked coordinate, find the coordinates of both. So this is a common mistake by this from the students. What they do is, when it comes to local minimum, they just write the x coordinates. X is equal to this much. When they ask coordinates, means x and y both. So one is this, -1.74 comma -3.71, and the other one is 1.67 comma -5.14.
I think that's also there in the question. Sometimes the question also asks the x coordinate.
Yes, exactly. Like in the second part of the question, if you said in the second part, it says find the x coordinate of of the point of inflection.
Yeah.
Now out here again, in point of inflection, so what exactly is point of inflection? We use different ways to teach in our classes. um, if you're teaching in A level, your approach might be different. If you're teaching in advanced placement AP class, maybe your approach will be different. If you're teaching in IB diploma, your approach will be different. So it all approaches are different, but there is one thing common in all the approaches, that first derivative at the point of inflection is always zero. So John, would you like to add something to point of inflection before we get down to the coordinate? Would you like to
No, go
this?
ahead. No, you go ahead. I just want, because you,
Okay,
this, everyone, I hope you guys understand that this is a question, this is from a question paper. So obviously, calculus has been done. Our topic
okay,
today is functions, and my question, of course, after Jalaj has done it using the examination way, which is, using the calculator, using calculus, so on and so forth. I want you also to be thinking, I don't know whether you've done, have you ever, at the start, when you're talking about functions, the key features, you're talking about these terms and all, have you ever used the word inflection point at that point of time? And again, I'm going back to what I said, without calculus. So anyway, just keep thinking about it. Jalaj, we'll come to that a little later on. I want you to first solve it with the use of calculus and calculator, blah blah blah.
great.
But we'll come to that later on.
Lovely. So basically, if we go to the concept of point of inflection, we are looking at the change in change. So if something is changing, then at what point the change is either highest or the lowest. So we are looking at that point. So change of change. That is why we say at point of inflection, the when you draw point of inflection, sorry, the second derivative is zero, not first derivative.
Yeah.
Did I say first derivative is
I
zero
think you
before?
said, I think you said the first derivative.
My apology. So the second derivative is zero. So if the second derivative is zero, then what should happen? The first derivative of the graph should have a turning point at the point of inflection, right? A stationary point or turning point or local maxima, local minima. And we have a wonderful tool here. So what we do is we just draw the first derivative here. So I'll change my graph entry, and out here, since I have already defined my function as fx, so I don't need to do much here. I'll go to shift, differentiation, integration is putting together, differentiation is differentiating. So I'll go to shift and minus. I get this template x, whose derivative I'm going to draw, derivative of fx. And once you enter, you get this one. So it doesn't look,
Pretty.
it's not in the range. We can't actually use it. So let me zoom out first. And if needed, we will adjust windows. Okay, so I think shall I? Let me do it. Okay, so I'll go to zoom box, and actually I need only this part. So, okay, so out here, the red one is the graph of the first derivative, right? So in the first derivative, at this point, what do we get?
You get a turning point for the first derivative then.
We get a turning point, and at this point we get a turning point. So now what I'll do is I'll find the coordinates of this. So how do I do this? Go back and trace again, graph trace. So where is my cursor? On the blue one. So I just use arrow to move it to red one. And oops, what is happening here? Okay, so when it goes up, 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 this is my maximum, and I enter. And the second one, this is minimum, and then I enter. So I think these two should be my point of inflection. Is it? Will they be?
I got a slightly different value, but I didn't, uh, like I said, if it were not taking into account that it is an exam. Of course, it's an exam. Then you're talking about you're using calculus to justify it's a 5 marker and all that. But here's the thing I've done in my class. I kind of when I'm talking about graphing and all that, right at the beginning, building it up. When they've been talking about intercepts and giving them other words for it, and how do we come up with that? How can we estimate and all those things? But I do mention these words also, asymptotes, because at certain points I do give the vocabulary, but I bring the idea of point of inflection and Jalaj, either because of my background with AP, which I've taught, for a longer time, I use that idea there. And in AP, I believe the idea for the point of inflection is the point where the concavity changes. So when I use the idea that, like even in quadratics we're talking about, concave up and concave down. So if I were to just eyeball it, and I'm talking, eyeballing, please try and understand, not examiner, those who are here, I'm just talking it because before calculus, okay?
Right.
That's the perspective. So if I may just share my screen quickly, I don't know whether my screen is up there.
So, John, one second moment here before you start sharing.
Yeah.
So these are the points down here on your screen. So these are the x coordinates of point of inflection. So just choose x coordinates,
Hanji.
and that is the answer.
Right,
So
right.
over to you, John.
No, Arif, you're right, absolutely right. You're talking about derivative, okay? And I'm not saying, please, again and again, I'm emphasizing, maybe I'll just show me myself in the full camera, okay? हाथ जोड़ के मैं बोल रहा हूँ, this is correct, whatever you're saying is correct. All I'm saying is I'm taking it from a non-calculus perspective, just at the primitive stages. If you were to even bring those ideas, I'm trying to push yourself, and to say, how do you describe? Okay, so without the use of derivative, and I said, that's why I said just eyeballing it. If you were to just give the idea and say that, you know what, that's the point around which the concavity will change, and ask them, okay, look at the graph, okay, that's the graph, okay, where do you think it's changing? Where do you think it's changing? And I'm not even drawing the derivative because Jalaj has done the absolutely right thing, using calculus, using the second derivative, first derivative, like Arif was saying, you could use the second derivative. But if you were to just introduce the idea of, I'm not saying you have to, but if you were to introduce the idea of the concavity change,
Yeah.
and then ask them even for a ballpark figure, I don't know, let me hear your comments. Jalaj, what do you think?
Yeah, it's great. But thing is like in context of IB, where IB talks about the real world scenario and modeling. So like when I'm in my class, so I take, let's say, example from economics, change in the demand. Okay. So over the period of last 1 year, because of Corona, these online shopping sites, the demand has gone really high, right? But it changes
Sure.
from month to month in different durations. So when was it highest? When was it lowest? So I try connecting this with those thoughts. And concavity, there's also great idea like.
No, I'm not. See, I don't get me wrong, Mrs. Naik.
No,
Absolutely. Right. Even
absolutely,
Mrs. Naik said the same
absolutely.
thing. What you guys have said, I don't, again, let me just get back to the full screen. Say, it's to explain anything correctly, you need calculus. Let's put it that way, okay? I'm just saying right at the beginning, would you rather, when you're talking about the features of the graph, when you're talking about increasing and decreasing, what is this feature called? Okay, this is given a name called concavity. The point of where the concavity changes. You can even bring in the ideas right now. It might just be a ballpark thing. It might not be perfect, okay? But as and when their understanding, their grammar, it's just like grammar. You begin to, when you're first reading, you just have certain ideas of how to construct a sentence. But the more you start reading more vocabulary, synonyms, antonyms, then obviously your writing style will change. You'll start beginning to use what do you call it, figures of speech. You'll start using quotation. And I think in the same way, if you look at functions, remember what I started off saying, functions is which we are able to describe the world. If that's my big question, then why am I not using the basic words to describe concavity? Initially, we'll use the basic words, but later as we grow in our knowledge and understanding, and then they can describe it better.
Absolutely.
So if our outlook for for functions is about describing the whole world, as we started off saying, then we start with basic understanding and basic words, and then let the kids develop the things and all. It's okay to disagree, but I'm glad to hear such comments here, agreeing and all. But if there's something that you are picking up, I'm glad, and it's okay. Even I'm here to learn from you all. But I'm keeping an eye on the time also. So Jalaj, if you can move on to the next question.
Okay, next question is the domain of f is now there is a restriction here from 0 to a. Write down the largest value of a for which f has an inverse, giving your answer to this. Would you like to Shed some light on this.
I was reading the comments here. I'm trying to answer the questions happening at the same time there. तो मैं actually वहाँ पे
Okay,
चला
so
गया था. Would you please check what the two values are? Yes, he got a different answer. He was using the trace, and I just eyeballed it. Okay, so I'm okay with, like I said, my point was uh, before you actually use derivatives and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so I think somebody asked that question. What are the values you got? So I was just using a very ballpark figure just to get the idea, into the heads of what is point of
no, I
inflection.
think we have same answers, right? 0 point
Slight थोड़ा फर्क है जलज
negative 1.03
मेरे को
and
yeah
0.934.
slight and just like yeah but that's okay.
I saw.
All right, so the next part of the question is the domain of f is now restricted to 0 a closed interval 0 a, and the question just said write down the largest value of a for which f has an inverse. Give your answer correct to the correct to 3sf. That if you look at the graph, and of course the left hand point is already closed at 0. Let me just show. Since the left hand point is already 0, then we know that it will be 1 1 if we close it here. Okay,
0
if
to
A is,
A. Anything about A? No, nothing, right?
sorry,
Is there anything about A?
they've asked a like
A,
3sf.
no, no, no. About
हाँ,
A, like A is a real number, natural.
ऐसा
Nothing.
कुछ नहीं बोला, नहीं कुछ नहीं
नहीं है,
बोला.
कुछ नहीं है. Okay, carry on.
Okay, so if you can restrict, and that's clear, that portion of the graph, okay, is where you can see that there is no turning point. So
Absolutely,
in between
yeah.
the two turning points, if you restrict the domain, you're going to get a 1 1 function. So bang on there, you can get the answer to that as 1.67. For this value of a, after using that value, sketch the graphs of y is equal to f of x and f inverse on the same set of axes, showing clearly the coordinates of the endpoints of each curve. Now, again, I must caution you, this being the class, this is not the okay, these are exam questions, but as we said again and again, that the idea of entering a relation will not work, okay, in the press test mode. As I said, I think 3 times today I've already advertised my YouTube channel. I've made a video on that. Happy about it also. But if you have any comments, and if you're able to graph that relation, please let us know. Okay. So this is just graphing. Do you want me to go over this thing, Jalaj? Is there anything anyone needs to know about this?
If anyone like to see how it
Anyone wants this part?
goes,
Because then Jalaj can talk about the part 3, and okay, that's also, yeah, maybe you can continue with 3. And what you told me about this part of the question, I'd really like that, this part, because I'm keeping an eye on the time. It's 4:40 already. So if everyone is okay with C part 2, then I can hand over to Jalaj to do C part 2.
okay, in C,
Huh.
write down this for this value sketch. So yeah, just reflect in the line y is equal to x, and you get this one.
Which one are we talking about? What are we writing?
C2, right?
You mean graphing?
Graphing.
Yeah.
And
So
3.
so if you're not able, because I would say, yeah, the students should know that it is a reflection about the line y equals x.
Shraddha
And
ma'am is asking, please do.
regarding, what did she say? Please do, matlab, how to show that?
Uh,
If the graphing feature, like I said, if it's an exam mode, all right. Now, if it's a classroom, obviously you can show that to the students. Sec, you can just show that to the students and say, how to enter. What do I do here? Okay, I went to the relation mode, and as I said, the relation mode is not going to work out there. But in the exam, what you can tell the students is that once they have graphed that, please show the y equals x, okay, and they got to be able to trace the inverse as a reflection about the line y is equal to x. So if they've already graphed the original function with that restricted domain between 0 and 1.67, that was the value of a, okay, then the blue graph that it shows here is the reflection. This is not very symmetric. As you can see, the squares are not quite symmetric, so that's why it probably doesn't look like it, but it is symmetric about that line y equals x. So that's probably what you need to be able to
And John, I want to add one thing
yes,
to the participants. Like next week, we are going to see, like, this doesn't work in the press to test mode, but we will see how we can draw without a press to test mode. There is another way of doing that. We'll do on the next week. So stay tuned.
and
even before next week, if anyone is able to find out, okay, please email, let us know. Okay, in fact, yeah, I mean, as teachers, we are not just math teachers, but we are problem solvers. If there is a situation, we need to be able to share that and talk about it. So we found this thing. It might be a problem to some kids, but if we can find a workaround, let's share. Okay.
And one more thing here. The question reads to sketch the graph. It is not the drawing.
Correct.
So just a sketch where you need to show important points, mark them, and we are done. Right?
All right.
So moving on,
Yeah.
D part, are we at part D, John?
Haan ji, D
Yeah.
part.
Find an expression for G inverse stating its domain. Finding G inverse is okay, and then solve F in F O G this composite function of
Hmm.
composite function inequality,
Inequality.
and this is total 8 marks. So, do you mind if I share my
Yeah,
screen?
please, yeah.
Okay, right. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so this is gx is equal to 2 sine x minus 1 minus 3, and the domain is between negative pi by 2 plus 1 up to pi by 2 plus 1. So we need to find an expression for inverse function. So let's say this is equal to y. I usually in the class I just interchange x and y and then make y the subject of formula. So x is equal to 2 sine y minus 1 minus 3 will be the inverse. So from here I get sine of y minus 2, sorry, y minus 2 is equal to x plus 3 whole divided by 2. So y is equal to 2 plus arc sine or sine inverse of x plus 3 upon 2. Now we can replace this y by g inverse x. So this is an expression for g inverse x. And this question is worth 8 marks. So if this is 8 marks, I'm assuming this would be possibly 2 marks or maximum 3 marks. And then it says, okay, it says stating its domain. So domain means it may be 3 to 4 marks max. Now domain means this part. um, this is arc sine, so sine inverse x plus 3 upon 2. So this has to lie between negative 1 and 1. So out here, if you see, then x plus 3 is less than equal to 2, less than equal to negative 1. And from here, you get x plus 3 is more than equal to negative 2. The sign, inequality sign will not change because we are cross multiplying with 2. So if it was negative 2, it would have changed. So x is more than equal to negative 5.
The inverse is 1 plus, and Jalaj, it's one. It's not 2 plus. It's 1 plus. Um, uh, the G inverse you wrote 2 plus arc sine, no? It's 1
Did
plus.
I write?
Yeah, yeah. And while this is also okay, what I just did was I just did the graph
1
of
plus.
what I
Is
did
it
was,
1 plus?
yeah, it is 1 plus.
Where maybe I copied it
Yeah,
incorrectly.
yeah.
Yes. So this is also 1. Thanks, John.
Nee, Mr.
So
Vinayak,
sine of 1, this was sine of y minus 1, so it becomes 1. Fine.
I looked at the
But
graph of G and then I just pulled out the domain of G inverse from there. You know,
I see.
the range of the idea. That's another good thing to understand, that if you have questions where you know, I mean, when you're speaking about domain and range, especially when you're looking at inverse functions, this idea that students can have or need to have, should have, that the domain and range can be flipped, you know, because the range of the function becomes the domain of its inverse when we're talking with the
Yes,
one function.
absolutely.
So in that same context, when in this particular question, when they asked about the domain of the inverse, I just graphed the plotted the graph of G and pulled out the range from there. Go ahead, Jalish, the last part.
Yeah. So domain of G inverse will be negative 5 to negative 1, both inclusive, right?
Huh.
Now, next part is very interesting. It is solve this equation, which is F inverse OG, OGX is less than 1. So we can rewrite it as F inverse of GX. So F inverse of GX is less than 1. Now, what happens in this from this point? There are so many different ways. Either you can do it graphically, or you can find an expression for the composite function of F inverse OG. Or if you look at part C2. In part C2, you're supposed to solve f inverse x is equal to 1. And what was f inverse x is equal to 1? If you look at this part again quickly here, f inverse of x was 1. So f1 is equal to x, right? And what was f1 there, John? And was it negative 1.6 from the previous part?
I was looking at an expression. Which
C3, part C3.
C3? What are we asking? F inverse of x is equal to 1. Yeah.
Yeah, so x is equal to negative 1.6. So when you take f inverse of gx, it is less than 1. Now we are back to this equation. So gx will be f inverse. It was f inverse. So when you move it, it becomes f of 1, right? And remember that f1 has a negative value. So the sign of inequality will change from gx to gx more than, right? So this will be gx is more than negative 1.6. So when gx is more than this one, so x will be more than g inverse of negative 1.6. And G inverse of negative 1.6. Where is our G inverse? G inverse is out here. So we just have to plug in the value and get the answer. So you can do this. Should I
No,
enter
that's
and
good.
find?
That is
Yeah.
good. That is good.
So I think this is one of the ways. And John, would you like to share any other method that you think we can
No, 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 no,
use?
no, no. This is great. Again, you're using the idea that the domain of the inverse is the same thing as the range, and then
Yeah,
you're looking at how the inverses behave.
exactly.
Is brilliant. Okay.
Because another thing is like in part C, we have done like most of
Yes.
D2.
Yes.
So I thought, why not we use it?
Yeah. Yeah. I,
So
uh, Jalaj, I know we've prepared one more question, but I
do
think
we
there's
have
a
time for
lot.
that?
That's what I was saying. We have just 9 minutes. I think why don't we just open it up for questions and comments and suggestions rather than
I
going
think
over
I
this?
think
Yeah.
that'll be great
I
because we if even if we start, we can't finish
then we
it.
won't be able to finish it. Yeah, because I think
Not even part A.
what we've done is that we've used basic questions. I hope everyone has understood. We used very I won't yeah exam questions paper too, but we've gone and tried to bring it down to the basics. So we just want to open it up for participants to share. There may certain things maybe you liked, maybe some things you did not like, maybe certain things that you agreed and disagreed, and maybe there are certain things that you've done in your class differently that you'd like to share and comment about. Please, this is time for all of us to speak up and not just. I mean, some if you're not comfortable speaking up, then you can obviously continue chatting and putting the point of inflection without using the idea of calculus. Yes, I did talk about concavity change. Let me just. Can I a graph this way, opening up a parabola, sometimes we use this word concave up. Is that right? And
Concave up, going up,
and
so it's concave
and
up.
obviously that part concave down.
Going down.
Okay, so that's how we talk about. Okay, that's the behavior of the graph. Okay, it's concave up this way, it's concave down this way. When we come to calculus, you're talking about, like I said, even when you spoke about increasing, decreasing, you can use the ideas there. But if I just stick to a definition saying, like I say, it's eyeballing and say where does, and when I say eyeballing, I'm just using the word that approximately, but at least this idea is there. The idea that there's a concavity change. So if I say the point where concavity changes. See, even when we do calculus, it's not so much about the second derivative being zero. Isn't it so much about that the second derivative can be zero, but what if there's no sign change? Remember the sign change? Jalaj, am I right in saying that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's not so much about the second derivative being zero, but it's about the sign change. And okay, when we do derivatives, that time we'll understand, concave up, you're talking about, second derivative have a different sign. But if you even bring this idea that, hey, can you estimate, and obviously at that time they're only looking at graphs, right? At the early stages they're only looking at graph and trying and figuring out, okay, where is it increasing, and approximately. That's the approach I used in that question. I don't know where that was. Where is it here? Yeah, using that approach here, and said, all right, if they were to say that, I said, okay, somewhere there in that region, somewhere there in that region, you can see a concavity change, that it's going from a concave up to a concave. Use another color for that, perhaps. What color can I use? Do I have something in pink? Yeah, go you. There you have a concave up to a concave down feature around there. Does that help? Does it help?
Great. John, I would like to add something here.
Please.
Um, Let me share my screen.
Hanji.
Yes. Okay, one moment. Yeah. This does not use the second derivative.
Acha.
So we can do it like by some sort of explanation here. Let's say this is a curve and we are talking about point of inflection here. So let me label these, some of these points. This point is A, this point is B, this point is C, this point is D. I will be using a little of derivative calculus here, but otherwise by discussion. So when a function is increasing, like from point A to point B, its derivative is positive here. Okay. From C to D, again, the first derivative is positive. And when we talk about this point from B to C, this is negative. But we know one thing for sure, that at point B and at point C, derivative is zero. Means we can say change is zero. There is no change at this point. So the point is stationary. Now think of a straight line. If there is a line, horizontal line out here, there are 2 points. One point is point B and another point is point C. At B and at C, value of something is zero. And we know that value of that thing. What is that thing? We don't know. Value of something is zero at point B and at point C. But value of that particular thing is not zero from B to C at every point. It means either it has to go up and then go to C, or it has to go down and go to C. So in this process, there will be a point when you move from B to C, there will be a point when something is highest or something is lowest.
That's a turnaround, yeah.
That is the point of inflection. So sometimes I use this also.
Nice. Nice. Very nice. Very nice. Any
Um,
other? Sorry.
I do have like same approach as John. I use the word, the shape changes, like open up, open down. Right. Sometimes even the using word concave makes student confused. So yeah, open up, open down. Any part of the graph shape is changing from like open up shape and open down change, right? Then that will be the point of inflection.
Yeah.
But John, it's so funny. I'm teasing you. The word using point of inflection, right? And that immediately indicating that we are inviting calculus.
That's
Yeah.
true. That is true. Okay, because that term is associated with calculus. You're absolutely
Yeah.
right. Yeah. True, true, true. Absolutely. Any other comments? I am trying to do.
Urvi.
I'm trying to challenge
Thanks.
myself in these days. I mean, I'm trying to see what new I can study, what new I can do, what new I can demonstrate. And I think the more we read, the more we chat and discuss, that's where we get to know where our discussions, where the choice of our words, what we lack. You know, yeah. Jalaj and I have been talking about this thing. We he has always had his YouTube channel for math. I've never done anything regarding math. So I said to myself, just 2-3 days ago, I said to myself, why don't I do a math video, So here's something, an encouragement to all educators. This is something why I feel each of you can try, okay? Now, when you were a B.Ed in B.Ed college or teacher training college or anywhere where you spoke, the best way to get feedback about yourself is when you record yourself. Is that right, Jalaj?
Yep, I remember we used to do that.
Yes. So, when Jalaj speaks, Jalaj will come and ask me, John, how was I? Then I give a feedback. Okay. So, one good thing to do is if you record yourself, you get feedback about yourself, how you're speaking. So, here's one reason why you should record yourself, not every day, but every now and then, so that you know what your gestures are, what your intonation is, and you have a record of that. And if it turns out well, hey, put it up there on YouTube. It's a resource. So that's just one idea. I thought to myself, why don't I do that just as a matter of me improving myself? And so that I thought I'll share with you also that if you also, I mean, yes, it's a commitment. If you make something, make a commitment. But I think every educator, just as a matter of improving ourselves, you can even record yourself and then see what goes. Okay.
There are some comments and some suggestions.
Yes. What is it?
Somebody is asking for email groups. Then after somebody liked my explanation. Thank you. Yogita said we use plus and minus value of a stationary point in plugin. Yes, we do that. Thanks. Thank you so much, John and Jalaj. The session was very informative. I have not been using TI Inspire much. Wanted to know if there can be a session basically on using the instruments. Absolutely. So I think you can get in touch with Revati. Am I right, John?
What did she say that only on TI?
She would like to know if there could be a session basically on using the instrument. Probably she meant starting from A to Z.
From the ground level. Sumiti, which school are you from if you want to speak up? Or because you see, I mean, there are sessions we've done for schools in particular, especially for their math departments, doing one on Monday also with tips group. So sometimes we do that also. But we've been doing this for a long time. We've not done a basics seminar for a long time on the Saturday forum. But if you can request it through your school, we can do it either, in particular only for your school on a different day, perhaps not on a Saturday, that is. Does it make sense? Or there has to be a special thing, then you'll have to talk to Revati, she'll pull it off. Okay, she'll
Yeah.
make it happen, but it's not, I'm not saying a no. It may happen on a Saturday, but it will definitely happen on a day that your school, if you can spell school. Which school is she from? Did she say that? Thank you all. If this, thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Love the
Thanks for.
discussion today.
Thank you so much, John and Jala.
Yes.
Thank you.
Marie, I'm waiting for the day that we are going to turn things on fire. See you all next Saturday.
See you all next week. Yep, definitely.
Sir,
Thanks, John. Thanks, Jalan.
Sir Jalaj, I have one question.
Please.
We have so many activities on GDC calculator. Do we use for students inside the classroom?
We must use. If you're not used, please start using.
But we don't have enough time.
We have. See, thing is a good planning. If we plan for, let's say, term one, and if we decide to use activities after the planning, it will be difficult. You will find there's no time. So I think if you don't have time, no problem. What you can do is next time before you plan, make sure that you have a slot for those activities. So these are basically, cognitive activators you can use to trigger inquiry in the class. And you're in CIS these days, right?
Sorry, sir?
You're in CIS, is it?
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So you guys do MYP also, am I right?
No. We have Cambridge and IB.
I see. So you can use it for like your explorations or any sort of inquiry to trigger inquiry in the class. So it goes with the planning, and it doesn't mean that we have to use it in every class, every lesson. Maybe once in a week, once in 2 weeks, or you can give some as a homework, as a project. So
I think
to cut you.
Yogita, if I may add, what I'd say is that, like Jalaj said, I totally agree that it's not that you have to do in every activity. Okay, sorry, in every class. What I'd like to do is that if I've done something with this year's 11th grade, next 11th grade, I'd probably choose another activity for that because there's, as you said, there's tons, right? But I I have also wisely used activities and given some of them as homework, given them some credit for that, because it is promoting that inquiry, so they are
Okay.
great skills to have, and then they bring back their learning, because then in class we can focus so much more about the the solving from their understanding. So what they do more like the what do you call that, flipped, so they've done some work, some kind of exploration at home, they come back into the classroom, and so yes, you're right, maybe one max two activities can be, because there's also a time that we need to try to keep in mind, so yes, we plan, but this is also a way of planning, saying that okay, I can do these two activities for this semester or this quarter, and then maybe next time I meet another batch, maybe I'll have to do another activity. Otherwise, sometimes you do something in a class and they'll say, oh yeah, Mr. Paul Raj, he'll do this activity. I don't like to be
Right,
predictable.
right,
I don't want to be predictable that way. So
right, right.
yeah, Pooja
And
said, yeah.
Pooja has a question here.
Yes.
May I ask something related to unit planner, something related to SL and HL number of hours? Please go ahead, Pooja.
Thank you, and thank you for the lovely information that you have been giving. Now, up till last year, I hope I'm audible.
Slightly the audio is a little weak. Are you traveling or something?
No, I am not. I'm maybe using the earplug. Is it? Just a second. Let me disconnect. Now is it better?
Much
It's
better.
great now.
Much better. What was it?
Yeah.
What was the
Thank
difference?
you.
What magic you did?
What I was asking, I disconnected my earplug. It had some internet, I guess,
Okay.
issues.
Acha.
So I'm saying that since last year I had the analysis HL student and application SL student. So I never had a problem in making my unit planner or the classes going smooth. Now this year I'm having analysis SL and HL both. And number of students are like 5 or 6 in one and another, I guess 6 or 7. And they have not finalized the things. Now while making the unit planner, and I've got only 4 slots in a week. And each slot is having 45 minutes. I have in that slot only 45 minutes. Now I'm making a unit planner. We use ManageBack as our school's platform. So my coordinator has given me one class. Okay. Now I am not sure if I say I am planning my unit planners as per the HL hours. Is that advisable, and how do I go about? I mean, even I am not given bifurcated classes for SL and HL. So I'm literally facing a little difficulty there.
I know, like, because I had never taught a combined class, combined HLSL, but I would have gone with the planning for HL class only. Because
Okay.
because if you see, like, the requirement is you have 240 and 150 for maths, HL and SL, and you're doing AA, right? Analysis.
Yes.
In analysis, for SL, you have 21 hours for functions, 21,
Yes.
and 32 hours
45.
for
Yeah,
32
yeah.
for HL, right?
Yeah.
So you have 11 hours more. So maybe you could do core part first. And I don't even like this idea. You complete your core parts, then you go on to SL, then you go on to HL. So
Yeah.
if you have your
What I
separate
have
class,
done,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I requested for it, but the timetable for me, since I'm the only teacher in the school, it did not permit maybe. But is it a good idea to have a same unit planner? Even that is a question on ManageBack. Like, how do I go about it?
See, when it comes to, like, in manage back, when you go for the reflection during the unit and after the unit,
Yes.
it's difficult to justify. Even like when you have assessments, you cannot dilute assessments that will be unjust for HL. And if you make overly difficult for SL, again for formatives, you can do differentiation, but you can't do this much of differentiation. So
Yeah.
it will be difficult. So I don't have actually a good answer for this, But
For my classes, I have planned. Just a second. I'm so sorry. Whom am I interrupting? I don't know. For my classes, when I'm getting 45 minutes, I have requested my HL students to join 15 minutes early, so that I classes divided the first half for HL and second half for SL. So separated amongst the class.
John?
I have a experience in the previous school teaching
Okay.
HL and SL students in the same class, and I was given 15 minutes per week, and 3 of them were HL and SL in the same class. Um, I could see your difficulty. It is really difficult, but at the same time, you need to see the positive side. One of the positive side is what you could do. You know, sometimes in the class, you give students some classwork and then wait until they finish the classwork, right? And then I switch those HL and SL. It's like this: you plan ahead, give HL students instruction while SL students assign some work and switch back and forth. But you know, time-wise, it is quite difficult. But teaching same topic to HL and SL doesn't work simply because their pace is different.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it is almost impossible to teach same topic at the same time, but it is doable. It is doable, but it takes more careful breakdown of your planning.
I agree.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah. I mean, it is really challenging. So you should talk to administrator that it is too difficult for you. In terms of documentation, it is more than double. Really, it is more than double. So it is quite challenging, but it is not impossible. It is not impossible because in the beginning, I was forced to do so because the number of students was not that big, but you know, there you can find some good planning if you have experienced some like, you know, some the careful planning. HL, what how much I'm going to teach, and SL, how much I'm going to teach, and what work will be assigned, what is the estimate of time for them to complete that classwork.
True. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mary, for this insight.
Thank you.
I had a
Vandana.
question. I think
So
Yogita
I have one more question. May
Yes.
I please?
Sorry, not Yogita. Yeah, please go ahead.
I'm going to teach MAIHL first time, and I am finding there is a coordination of topics internally, like what you teach in Unit 1 matrices is also in Unit 3 in geometry, and also in calculus, in probability. So should we go like a spiral, or we go chapter by unit? What do you suggest?
John.
the concentric or the spiral approach. Okay. However, here's the thing, Yogita. If you are the only one teaching, if you don't have like two separate sections and there are two different teachers teaching, and there's a difference of opinion on that, then there's a problem. Okay. So I've had both experiences when I was the only one who's teaching the course, and I could spiral wherever I wanted to, and you know, of course, you know, keeping the concepts concentrically coming around and growing that way in the covering of the curriculum, the syllabus. But if you are if you have a colleague teaching the other section, then there is going to be a problem. So that's where it's not worked for me. Although I like the other approach, that requires a lot more planning and precision, by the way.
Right. I was looking at the videos and the material, and actually, my HOD is very supportive.
Huh.
He really guides me well. So I was thinking, will it help students? I'm going to plan my unit planner, working on it. So is it going to be helpful, or they will be more confused?
No.
So Jalaj can tell me, as he knows the standard of students in Jakarta.
Here one more thing I would like to add. I used to do content voice planning, keeping contents in mind, looking at the different strands, number, algebra, geometry, trigonometry, all those things, and then plan. This time I'm planning to do my unit planning concept wise, conceptually. So when we are talking about a concept, collect everything from entire syllabus and see where I can fit it smoothly. I will look for connections suggested in IB, like subject guide, and I'll try going that way. So I have started doing it actually. So before schools open, so if it is successful, I'll be using concept wise. Otherwise, I'll go back and do it content wise.
Okay. Thanks a lot, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It was a wonderful time again, and we will connect next week. Equally fascinating topics. I think we've got something wonderful lined up for the next couple of weeks. We will definitely. And so, if there are ideas that you guys want to hear being discussed in the webinars, do let Revdi, Jalad, Hassan know about it, and we'll see how it can be incorporated and brought to light in on the Saturday webinars. But if there's any no curve sketching could be one of the topic. Absolutely, Purvi. That's very dear to my heart, but we should do that. However, here's the thing. As much as possible, we try and keep it related to technology. Okay, so we did our best today, but we kept it, scaled it up this way. So as much as possible, we try and keep it, because at the end of the day, remember, it's a webinar that's hosted by Numerical Analytics, done for Texas Instruments. So try and keep it with the technology. So curve sketching we can do, but we'll have to understand that from the perspective of the technology, and then use those ideas how we can do it without GDC. We can plan it that way. Make sense? Jalaj, did I answer that correctly?
Perfect.
Yeah. Cool.
You're the best, John.
Are we going to have another in another thing, or we'll wait here only? Revdi,
Yeah,
Hassan,
here
anything else?
only.
Here
Yeah.
only. Okay.
So thank you all for having this wonderful session by John and Jalaj. Thank you so much, and we will see you next week. Be there. Thank you. You can.
Maybe I should play some music. I don't know. Maybe Hassan should play some music at the end of all this. Really went quiet today. Thank you. Okay.